Hi, I'm Mike, and I'll be presenting on reasoning about counterfactuals to improve human and reinforcement learning. For robots to be seamlessly integrated into human society, humans must be able to understand robot decision-making and predict their behaviors. One way that robots convey their decision-making is through demonstrations, like this one. So what makes this demonstration informative? It's informative for a human unsure about mud, who would have expected the robot to go through it. This hypothetical behavior in the human's mind is what we refer to as a counterfactual, and the difference between the robot's demonstration and the human's counterfactual conveys the information that mud is costly to go through. This example captures a key idea behind our approach of providing demonstrations that informatively differ from the human's counterfactuals to convey robot decision-making to a human. With this intuition in mind, let's now dive into how a robot can represent its decision-making. Imagine that the robot's behavior is driven by a reward function R that's a weighted linear combination of features along its trajectory, which here includes the number of mud squares entered, whether it recharges battery, and the total number of actions taken. We also assume that the human learner knows the features but needs to learn the robot's reward rates by observing demonstrations, like the one shown to the right. Thus, the natural question that arises is, how do we measure the informativeness of demonstrations for revealing the robot's reward rates to a human? To answer that, we turn to inverse reinforcement learning. Before the human sees any demonstrations, we can assume that the human's belief over the three weights can be represented as the surface of this two-sphere due to the well-known scale ambiguity of reward functions. Let's walk through how this demonstration on the left provides information regarding the robot's reward rates. First, because the robot takes no unnecessary actions, the human may infer through IRL that the action weight is negative. Next, because the robot takes 2 extra actions to detour around mud, the human can infer that going through mud must be at least twice as costly as an action. Importantly, the set of weights that obeys all constraints is called the behavior equivalence class. Intuitively, the smaller the region, the less uncertainty there is regarding the robot's reward weights and the more informative the demonstration. So you might be thinking, why not simply provide demonstrations that yields the smallest BC area? Providing you with the punchline up front, we notice that potentially highly informative demonstrations were often more difficult to comprehend. Let's consider this demonstration. Upon first glance, you may think that this demonstration is fairly informative and that it shows you that it's good to pick up the package and to recharge, but that it doesn't say too much about the mud. Because it doesn't go through the mud, you know that the mud is not good, but not if the mud is explicitly bad. However, there's this other shorter path that could have been taken through the mud, but wasn't. So you should also infer that mud is not just neutral, but is instead as costly as 2 steps. This is a potentially highly informative demonstration, but it requires the learner to consider all potentially relevant counterfactuals to glean that information. Thus, measuring how informative a potential demonstration will be is contingent on the counterfactuals likely on the human's mind, and this is a primary challenge addressed in this paper. Exploring this challenge further, given that the human has seen this first demonstration to the left, what counterfactuals should be considered to be on the human's mind in this new environment on the right? A proposed method is to maintain a model of a human's current beliefs given the previously seen demonstration, sample some of the possible beliefs, to take the corresponding optimal trajectory as the human counterfactual. For this human counterfactual, the robot demonstrating a different behavior that goes through the mud would be very informative, which would then serve to upper bound the cost of the mud in relation to the cost of each action in the human's mind. Now that we have a calibrated measure of demonstration informativeness, we can ease humans into learning by using the educational technique of scaffolding to convey a series of demonstrations that incrementally provide information to the human. A sample scaffolded teaching sequence looks something like this. Note that for each demonstration, the counterfactuals considered are ones that are sampled from the running human model, which is why this technique is labeled counterfactual scaffolding. A critical component of teaching is testing, and the second contribution of our work considers how to measure the difficulty of a potential test. One insight of our previous work was that the BC area of a behavior also correlates the difficulty of predicting it as a test. Thus, the larger the BC area, the easier the test, or so we thought. We later realized that there are scenarios in which the BC area of a behavior could be quite large, shown here in yellow, but not correspond to many of the weights in the human's mind, shown in green, which would arguably make it a difficult behavior for that human to predict. Thus, for our second contribution, we update our test difficulty measure to be the overlap between reward weights optimal for that behavior and the reward weights likely to be on the human's mind. Such a high overlap corresponds to low difficulty and vice versa. To validate our methods, we ran an online user study in which participants learned about the reward functions of robots in 3 unique domains. We had 5 to 7 demonstrations and then were given tests of various difficulties. We found significant differences between people's percentage of optimal responses between low, medium, and high difficulty tests, and people's confidence in their responses also negatively correlated strongly with difficulty, with the high difficulty inspiring the least confidence. We found interesting results for our counterfactual scaffolding, which increased performance for high difficulty tests over baseline scaffolding that didn't use human counterfactuals, but it also decreased human test performance for low difficulty tests. It was also rated to require more mental effort to understand. This nuanced result, we believe, actually demonstrates the dual nature of scaffolding, which are to ease a human into learning, while also deliberately challenging them with new information that they must reconcile in their mind to learn. For example, we felt that mental effort was always to be avoided, but to our surprise, the education literature tells us that higher mental effort can actually be correlated with increased learning, as long as the student is progressing. In summary, we account for the beliefs of a human learner to provide demonstrations that informatively differ from the human's counterfactuals during teaching, and to more accurately assess the difficulty of potential tests for assessment. Thank you for listening, and I'll be happy to take any questions that you may have.